It is now my delight and pleasure to introduce Mr. Jeffrey Lozon, President and Chief Executive Officer and a Director of Revera Inc. Over the past few days, I have taken note of the vast amount of information on Canada becoming a nation of the aging and the very young. Statistics lead to the Canadian population aging more rapidly than ever before. The population of those over the age of 65 has surged to nearly 5 million over the past 5 years and growing faster than any other group, and a trend that is poised to take on momentum. With these statistics comes the fear of an increase in health care, a workforce that is aging at an ever-increasing rate, and a shrinking net worth for young Canadians. Mr. Lozon is living in the world of statistical concerns and negative attitudes every day. As President of Revera Inc., a leader in seniors' accommodation and care. Prior to his position at Revera, Mr. Lozon held a 17-year tenure as President and CEO of St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. During his time at St. Michael's, he was seconded to the position of Deputy Minister of Health and Long-Term Care for the province of Ontario. In addition, he served as the Vice Chair for the Canada Health Infoway and the founding Chair of the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer. In 2009, Mr. Lozon was appointed member of the Order of Canada for his innovative and sustained leadership in healthcare management and for having advanced patient care, most notably at St. Michael's. Mr. Lozon has held faculty positions at the University of Toronto, the University of Alberta, and the University of Saskatchewan. He holds an honorary Doctor of Civil Law from Bishop's University, a certificate from the Senior Executive Program, Stanford University School of Business, a Master's of Health Services Administration from the University of Alberta, and an Honours BA from the University of Guelph. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Jeffrey Lozon.
Thank you, Verity. It's been 12 years since I've spoken to the Empire Club. The last time I did it, I was a recovering Deputy Minister of Health, and now I'm the leader of a company serving seniors, and it's really a privilege to be able to be here to speak from two different but related perspectives. This year, the Empire Club is 109 years old. This is an impossibly old age by human standards, or at least it used to be. Because the fact is that if you're a baby girl born this morning in Tokyo, the chances of you living to 100 are now 1 in 2. We're not there yet, but life expectancy at birth today in over 33 countries is now more than 80, and in Canada it's at 81. Canadians are living longer and in greater numbers than ever, but living longer is no guarantee of living better, and growing old can mean growing frail, ill, and even destitute. True, we have a good healthcare system and a growing elder care system. The latter involves retirement communities, home care, and long-term care facilities. Retirement communities are privately operated, geared to people who can live independently and can choose from a number of different services, including health care. Home care is as it sounds. You live at home and care comes to you, often delivered by nurses or personal support workers, and paid for either privately or by the government. Long-term care is government-funded and regulated and offers 24-hour-a-day nursing and health care. There's much to praise about our elder care system, and we have much to be proud of, particularly the hundreds of thousands of workers who provide care and service across Canada to older Canadians. They do so with compassion and with love. But a series of systematic challenges, from burgeoning boomers to rising healthcare costs to cash-strapped governments and to outdated thinking about what the meaning of getting old is, have conspired to make the prospects of our old age dimmer when they should be brighter. We can brighten them, that is our prospects, if we are bold and thoughtful. And there's another issue that's bigger than the ones I've mentioned, and it's powerful enough to push older Canadians further towards the margins of society and harmful enough to diminish the prospects of our economy, our civility, and our gross national happiness. I'm talking about the growing problem of ageism. Ageism is a problem of perspective. In fact, I view the major impediment to our dealing successfully with aging is not found so much in government funding formulas or in miracle drugs, but in our perspective on aging. Frankly, it's filled with bias of ignorance and arrogance. Now, the Ontario Human Rights Commission defines ageism as a socially constructed way of thinking about older people based upon negative attitudes and stereotypes about aging. In other words, it's stereotyping people based on their age. The reality is, ageism is the most widely experienced and most tolerated form of social discrimination in Canada today. The same for Europe and for America. No one in this room would discriminate openly against someone because of their race, color, creed, religion, or sexual preference. Yet oddly, we feel free to discriminate openly against someone who's old. When an older person can't remember a name quickly, it's obviously impending dementia. Or if we equate someone elderly who's walking slowly with thinking slowly, it's almost a given that we talk about old age as a time of failing powers and rising misery. But the fact is, in study after study, people grow happier as they grow older, and our oldest generation is our happiest. Given the disparity about how older citizens feel about life and how those who are younger sometimes feel about them, it's no surprise ageism has a detrimental impact on performance and productivity at work and at home. But the real harm, the deep, deep hurt of discrimination on the basis of age, is that it limits choice. It limits choice. When it comes to older Canadians, we suffer from a failure to recognize that older people want choice. Choice in how they spend their time and money. Choice in how they're cared for and how they pay for that care. And ultimately, choice in how they will live the latter parts of their lives. And what limits that choice is not just policies and practices or genetics, but the attitudes that drive those policies and practices. Both last year and this, Revera conducted our own research on aging and ageism. We wanted to find out for ourselves if our impulses were correct around the power of ageism and how deeply it's embedded in our society. Today, we released the results of our most recent research on this matter. We produced the Revera Report on Ageism in partnership with the International Federation of Aging. We found that 1 in 3 Canadians admit they've treated someone differently because of their age. Nearly 2/3 of all seniors, 63%, said they've been treated unfairly because of their age. And fully half of Canadians are prepared to admit that ageism is the most tolerated prejudice in our country. These numbers confirm what we learned in 2011 when we studied the aging experience and expectations of seniors. There is a serious social issue here. I can almost guarantee that everyone in this room will enter old age at some time, and when you, or rather we do, I know you'll want all the choices and the powers that we carry with us. This requires our society to offer choices and alternatives that our current society does not. It's time for that to change, and it's up to us in the room to give the decision makers, the elected and unelected officials, the business and social leaders, you and me, the information and support we need to change the prospects for Canada's fastest growing group of citizens. I'm in that group, a proud card-carrying boomer. I feel like I can go to a Rolling Stones concert and bring down the average age of the attendees, if not the performers. Let's not forget, boomers are the first generation in history that has real choice about how we spend our last 20 or 30 years. Unlike previous generations and most other societies today, Canada's baby boomers have the dollars, the battalions, the technology, and our famed sense of entitlement to literally transform what it means to become old. So how are we going to start that transformation? Well, a good first step is to join in common cause to attack ageism and to redefine what it means to become old. That's why I'm announcing today the launch of a campaign that will start to do that very thing. We call that program Ages More. Under that banner, Revera is challenging the negative attitudes and stereotypes facing seniors, and at the same time, we're showcasing the contributions of older people across Canada. We're going to act as an information clearinghouse, as a social media facilitator, a connector, and as a bully pulpit for what we believe to be the last negative ism left standing in Canada. Starting today, you can learn more about this at www.agesmore.com. I urge your organization to think of what active and effective measures it can take in order to put ageism at the forefront of your own stakeholders' attention. Because the good news is that finding ageism is something that just by bringing it to life, people are apt to say, oh, right, rather than you're wrong. Like most isms, ageism feeds off of myths. So I want to highlight some of the most enduring myths around old age and elder care. These myths have helped shape our view of old age as a giant funnel with choices diminishing the more you age. I believe the opposite, and I hope to convince you that old age can be a giant supermarket filled with wonderful opportunities if only we start thinking that way. The first myth is related to a field I know well, how we care for the elderly. This myth says that long-term care facilities are bad places to live your final days, that they hasten death and degrade the quality of life. This myth belies the fact that long-term care facilities look after large numbers of people, the vast majority of them exceptionally well. Like hospitals, they are highly regulated by the government. Like hospitals, they are all about improving their quality of care. There's always work to be done around quality of care, and we mustn't lose our focus on that for a second. Our company and our industry is devoted to that journey. That said, Ontario's long-term care residences are homes that provide compassionate care and comfort to thousands. Another myth related to the first is that home care can totally replace long-term care. It would be wonderful if it could, but like most things around elder care and health care, it's complicated. The growth of home care does not replace the need for quality long-term care. Nor is it necessarily the right answer for seniors requiring service and care. Together, though, they are choices and options that can be pursued by seniors as they look at how they want to live out the remainder of their days. The sheer complexity of services offered through long-term care, home health, and retirement communities means that, well, in Revera's case, our 30,000 employees look after more than 30,000 clients every day. And they have literally hundreds of thousands of interactions with those clients. Our people practice compassion in everything they do. Indeed, while all of their clients are old, many of our employees are old as well. I'm not shy in saying this. I'm proud to say we have more and more seniors every year on our payroll. On our staff are 21 registered nurses over the age of 70 and 26 personal support workers over 70. And we're happy to attract people from this age group. Here with us today is Dorrit Nelson, a 64-year-old nurse from Main Street Terrace, a long-term care facility, and 65-year-old Herman Vickers, who is a housekeeper in our Forest Hill retirement community. Not only do they have great skill and experience, but they bring that crucial element of empathy to their work. Neither of them are over 70, but if they want to be working with us at that time, when they get to be 70, we welcome them with open arms. And it's not just our seniors who are helping others. In a few years, as the percentage of Canada's elderly population accelerates, the idea that we spend more time taking care of our parents than they spend taking care of us will morph into another interesting twist. The fact that more seniors are not only receiving care, but they are providing it as well. As we approach the U.S. election just 4 days from now, I'm reminded of the 1984 presidential debate between Walter Mondale and a much older Ronald Reagan. With a single sentence, Reagan put to rest the fears that he was too old for the Oval Office. Said Reagan, "I want you to know that I will not make age an issue in this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience." So let me ask you, are the hiring practices in your organization tilted to the young over someone with decades more experience? If so, why? There may be a good reason, or there may not be a good reason at all. And what about aligning your rising number of older customers and clients with people in the same age group to serve them? It's tempting to think of ageism as a government issue or as a social issue, but in many ways, ageism is a business, productivity, and economic issue. And as Canada's largest generation retires, sometimes forcibly with its positions filled by a much smaller generation, well, the math doesn't work well if older Canadians aren't encouraged to remain in the workplace. Another myth I want to puncture is that the senior care industry is not innovative. I think this too finds its origins in ageism. Older people are slow and set in their ways, and so it follows that the industry that serves them is much the same. It's true, many of the province's long-term care homes are old themselves. They need renovating, upgrading, and replacing. And we certainly need more of them. Yet despite all this, innovation abounds, as it does in almost any other industry. Revera is partnering with the University of Toronto's TAG Lab, which creates and promotes new technologies to strengthen identity, autonomy, and community as people age. This includes everything from large print and talking e-books to apps that combine location sensing with memory enhancing, to games seniors and their grandchildren can play together even though they're not in the same place or even in the same time zone. And there's even a touchscreen photo frame that sends messages to a loved one's email sort of saying, "I'm thinking of you." Note that all of these examples involve going online, and that dispels another myth, that seniors don't get technology, or they don't have a focus on how to make it work for them. Well, according to a report Revera did recently on tech-savvy seniors, there's a growing army of seniors who are flocking to technology to make their lives safer, more secure, and more meaningful. In 2000, only 5% of Canadians 75 and older were online. Today, that number has grown fivefold to 27%. And 88% of those go online every day. Seniors are one of the fastest growing cohorts for technology adoption. Today as well, many retirement communities have service standards and programs that match those of top-flight hotels. And many long-term care residences are being upgraded with an eye to making them feel more like home away from home. What's more, all of us in the industry are embracing the principles of evidence-based design in those facilities, with direct input from our caregivers and particularly from our clients. We're all nipping and tucking our residences so they are more like home. I remember my days as Deputy Minister of Health. Back then, heart disease was the biggest killer of Canadians, so it got most of the money and extra funding. I also remember when I was a CEO of a hospital, it was cancer that got the attention and the funding because cancer was and is devastating more families than any other disease. Today, one of the things we're preparing for is Alzheimer's. The Alzheimer's Society of Canada estimates that nearly 750,000 Canadians today have Alzheimer's or a related dementia disease. By 2031, that number will double to 1.4 million. The financial consequences are huge. The combined cost of dementia today is $33 billion. By 2040, that figure could rise to $292 billion. Alzheimer's is underfunded and misunderstood by too many and grows increasingly lethal every year. I'm here to raise my hand and say it's about time that dementia and Alzheimer's disease got the attention and funding they deserve. There are huge opportunities for advancement in research and in care, and we should act now. In fact, the Alzheimer's epidemic presents such a clear and present danger that, in my opinion, we need a national strategy on Alzheimer's, a response equal to the threat that it poses to our health and our healthcare systems. I ask you, does ageism play a role in our slowness to act decisively and in a massive way? After all, this is an epidemic that if it were in our water system or in our food chain, we'd be leaping to action. Committed communities have changed how we see HIV and AIDS. Perhaps we can do the same for Alzheimer's. Now, if someone had to lie down because they were feeling weak, you would never say they're having a cancer moment. But I've often heard someone, when they forget something, being said, well, you must have an Alzheimer's moment. That's ageism, in my opinion. One defining quality of ageism, and it's true of every form of discrimination, is that people are viewed as groups, and groups are viewed as having exactly the same characteristics. So when we talk about the elderly, our minds often conjure up a single image, often of a frail person with nothing left to contribute. Needless to say, Revera and others in our industry take a dramatically different view. The people we serve come to us from all different walks of life with different set of expectations. More and more of them come to us from different cultures. They live in one of the most diverse countries in the world, also in the history of the world. And I believe we have an obligation to respect the very diversity of choice that makes that distinction possible. We can do more to offer an individually and culturally sensitive future. So yes, we begin with the individual, not the group, and we work to help them live their lives to the fullest. We turn the telescope around and begin with the person and their needs. From this, we create communities that speak to the whole person. It's tempting to think that wellness when you're 80 means one thing: you're not sick. But when you're 40, we all know that wellness has a much broader definition. And because we believe that you're just as much a person when you're 80 as when you're half of that, we've developed a wellness model that has 6 parts. It starts with physical wellness, of course, but it also includes emotional wellness, spiritual wellness, vocational wellness, intellectual wellness, and finally, social wellness. So when one of our caregivers asks, are you feeling well today? It's a more complex question than it first sounds, and we probe for more complex answers. Preserving a sense of control and choice is crucial as we age. And we might think moving our parents from home care to a communal living would remove that control and choice. Absolutely not. Indeed, when people move into our homes from their own, our experience has shown that often their physical and emotional health improves. Perhaps the most important tool in maintaining mental alertness is social interaction, and we have that in spades. And when our seniors feel more alive, believe me, so do their adult children. Finally, this brings me to the last myth of aging, that the government will be able to pay the whole shot for our elder health care. How can a province that spent 32 cents on every dollar on health care in 1990 and 46 cents of every dollar on health care in 2000, and a decade from now could be spending 70 cents on every dollar on health care, how can this province pay for the huge extra cost of care for the largest cohort of people in our nation's history? How can any provincial government be expected to pay for all this? It can't, especially when there are fewer taxpayers in the generation following the boomers and much greater usage of the healthcare system by the boomers. Jeffrey Simpson of the Globe and Mail wrote a book about healthcare called Chronic Conditions. He describes Medicare as the third rail of Canadian politics. Touch it and you die. But the plain fact is, we ought to start talking about how we're going to pay for our elder healthcare system, and particularly for paying for our health as we grow older. It's clear to anyone who can add that we can't ask government to pay for the whole shot of our healthcare. Government can't pay and probably shouldn't, because that would mean providing a single standard with a monochromatic range of choices. That's not how Canadians live their lives. What our conversation needs is what our healthcare system needs, and that's choice. There simply has to be a new sense of choice around what products and services, what living arrangements and healthcare options are going to be available for my generation that is growing old at record rates throughout the industrialized world. Those choices can't be limited by what the government defines as an acceptable range of services. Although they must certainly include that list, they need to be a mix with some offered by the government and some by the private sector. It's no coincidence that the very thing older Canadians want most, more choice, is the same thing that will help reform the very systems that they will seek and need. When I started preparing this speech, Dalton McGuinty was the Premier of Ontario. By the time I finished, he wasn't. But whoever leads the provincial government in the years to come needs to come to grips with that huge issue around the fastest growing cohort of Ontario senior voters. So let me end where I began, by talking about ageism. I believe firmly that the greatest and most harmful byproduct of ageism is the pernicious removal of choice. Ageism does what any form of discrimination does. It removes choice because it views everyone in a particular group as basically the same. If we view everyone as part of a group, and that group is not defined by their health or income or interest, but by their age, and if growing old is seen as a slow, steady process of taking away someone's choices, either through ill health, public policy, or social perception, then growing old will absolutely be the funnel of diminishing choices I mentioned earlier. But if we stamp out ageism and the attitudes and actions it fosters, then old age doesn't have to be that. It can well and truly be a supermarket. New technologies, age-friendly cities and businesses, intergenerational programs, new funding models, regulatory reform, all of these can contribute to a quality of living that today's boomers deserve, afford, and enjoy. As for that baby girl born this morning in Tokyo, it will be a while yet before one in two girls born in Toronto reaches 100. But while we're preparing for that inevitable moment, we should also be asking how we can help her and everyone in Canada be able to choose from the many different ways of making their latter years some of their best. Thank you very much.
At this time, I'll have Alex Squires come up and help with the question and answer period.
At this time, we were going to take questions from the audience. So if anybody has a question for our speaker, Debbie.
There's one coming right to you right now.
So Debbie Benskowski, I'm with the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, and I just want to say, Jeff, that was a great speech. Thank you so much. The Alzheimer's Society of Canada really applauds what you have said. I think first with regard to the work that you've recently released in the study that you've done with the International Federation on Aging, that work on ageism is so relevant to all of us who are baby boomers ourselves and have reached that age or will be reaching that age after 2011. The Alzheimer's Society of Canada, as you know, people with Alzheimer's disease face an even greater stigma because they have ageism to contend with, but they also have the stigma of a very devastating disease that they have to live with. And often that prevents people from having good access to early diagnosis, care, and treatment because people fear a diagnosis, people fear having that news that they have a disease and that they have to tell their family members and their friends. So that's an enormous issue for people with Alzheimer's disease. The other comment I'd like to make is just to say thank you for joining our call for a national dementia strategy for Canada, our dementia plan. The World Health Organization came out with a report in spring last year, and the Alzheimer's Society of Canada was part of the consultation process that happened with them in the Alzheimer's Disease International Organization. And they called dementia a public health crisis of this century. And they called on governments around the world to develop a plan for how they were going to address the rising tide of dementia. Most G8 countries now have a plan. Canada still does not. So thank you very much for joining our call for that. And thank you for today.
Are there any more questions? Oh, sorry. Just over here.
You talk about changing social attitudes, and I'm wondering if you can give us any practical applications. I have several pet peeves, but one is when I hear that the problem with our healthcare is the seniors who are stuck in emergency. I hate being told seniors are a problem. So what are some of the practical applications you're thinking of for changing social attitudes?
I thought Alex Squires was going to answer that question. He was standing up, I was sitting down. So, there's a few things. So first of all, I think, one of the things, if you go to the website, www.ageismore, you're going to see some unbelievably important stories about seniors who are, I know there's one with us today who's over 90, who's like a computer whiz. She teaches, so you have fantastic role models. We have a resident in our Windermere on the Mount site in London, Ontario, who bicycles about 70 kilometers a weekend with his group. So I think part of it is we begin to sort of change perceptions, and we provide information to people that what we may have thought as a preconceived destination is not a preconceived destination in any way, shape, or form. So it's about getting a conversation going and providing some really interesting and relevant and accurate facts and figures around that conversation. That will help, but everybody has to engage with it, right? Because it is a broad social challenge.
Oh, we got one.
One more?
I was reading. Can you hear me? I was reading that there's a fair amount of research in dealing with the breakdown of the synapse. The Alzheimer's, the synapse.
On the topic of Alzheimer's actual research, I would never in any way, shape, or form hold myself out as an expert on the content of that. I do know we're lucky in Toronto that we have a place like Baycrest, which is so advanced in this area already, right? They do a fantastic job. But, I think given the challenges that we see in front of us from an Alzheimer's, in terms of the breadth of the disease, that I just think we need to have a national strategy. I was privileged earlier in my career to be part of a national strategy for cancer. And I think there was lots of questions raised at the time about whether it was duplicative for what was being done in Cancer Care Ontario or the BC Cancer Agency or the Alberta Cancer Board. But in point of fact, it wasn't. And what it was able to do is to bring together the best practices from across our country. So I think it's high time that we do something like that for Alzheimer's and for dementia.
If that's all the questions, I will express the thanks of the club. Madam Chairman, head table guests, members and guests of the Empire Club, today we heard a different view on the pending demographic problem of ageism. Our speaker discussed the implications on social, and that is the discrimination towards seniors, policy, a need for a national strategy for Alzheimer's disease, and the business, the choice, there being a choice of health care in future years using public and private sectors. Thank you for giving us hope that we will receive proper care in our final years. I had the pleasure of knowing Jeff for the past 15 years, primarily when he was the very capable president of St. Michael's Hospital. Jeff, thank you for addressing the Empire Club today and bringing your vast experience in healthcare in North America to the subject of our aging population.
Jeffrey, as a token of our appreciation on behalf of the Empire Club of Canada, I'd like to present you with a copy of quotes. There are over 100 years of quotes called Who Said That? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Finally, each one of you should find some brochures on the table. Please take a look at our upcoming events. There's pretty exciting events happening over the next few weeks. At this point, I'd like to thank Revera Inc. and the International Federation on Aging for sponsoring our event today. I'd like to thank the National Post as our print media sponsor. This meeting will be aired on Rogers TV, and we're very grateful. Thank you all for coming. We look forward to seeing you soon. This meeting is now adjourned.